I came home early that afternoon because I wanted to surprise my mother. I had good news, real news. The kind of news I had been working toward for 2.5 years, and I wanted her to be the first person I told. I parked outside, walked up the familiar steps, and pushed open the front door quietly because I thought she might be napping. She was not napping. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her sister, my Aunt Patris, and she was talking, not whispering. Talking freely, the way people talk when they are absolutely certain no one else is listening. I heard my name first. Then I heard my sister Emma's name. Then I heard my mother say 7 words that rearranged something permanent inside me. She said, "Emma's just more lovable than Lousia is." She did not hesitate. She did not lower her voice. She said it the way you state a fact about the weather. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something honestly. Have you ever worked hard your entire life to be enough for someone, only to find out quietly that their mind was already made up about you a long time ago? If that has ever been your experience, stay with me through this whole story, because what Lousia does next is not what most people expect, and the ending is going to matter to you personally. My name is Lousia. I am 31 years old. I work as a licensed structural engineer at a mid-size firm in a city that is about 90 minutes from the town where I grew up. I have a small apartment, a reliable car, a savings account I built from nothing, and a job I earned through 7 years of school and 3 years of grinding through an industry that does not make room for people who are not willing to bleed for it. I tell you these things not to impress you, but because they are the background of a story that would not make sense without them. And because for most of my life, none of those things were enough to make my mother look at me the way she looked at my sister Emma. Emma is 3 years younger than me. She has always been lighter in the way she moves through the world, softer in her approach to everything, easier to be around in the way a warm afternoon is easier to be in than a productive morning. I do not say this to be cruel toward Emma. I say it because it is true, and because understanding who Emma is matters for understanding what our mother built around her. Emma laughs quickly. She cries at commercials. She calls people sweetie and means it. She has never held a long-term job, but she has also never needed to, because something always appears at the right moment to carry her forward. A boyfriend who pays rent, a family friend who offers a position, our mother who fills in whatever gap remains. I grew up watching this. I grew up being the one who was responsible. I was the one who got the grades, handled the school forms, helped pay for school supplies when money was thin, and later helped my parents with bills during the 2 years my father was between jobs. I was not resentful about any of it in real time. I genuinely wanted to help. But I noticed, even when I was young, that helping never translated into warmth from my mother. It translated into expectation. The more I could handle, the more she expected me to handle, and the less she seemed to worry about me because I was simply the one who handled things. Emma was the one she worried about. Emma was the one she called first in the morning. Emma was the one she brought soup to when she had a cold, drove to appointments, texted good morning every single day. I used to tell myself it was because Emma needed more. I used to tell myself that my mother loved us differently because we were different people, and that different was not the same as less. I spent a significant portion of my life telling myself that story because the alternative was too heavy to carry, while I was still trying to build something real. I finished my undergraduate degree in civil engineering. My mother came to the graduation ceremony. She took pictures. She hugged me. But the energy in the room that day was different from the energy 2 years earlier when Emma had gotten a certificate from a 6-week hospitality program at a community center downtown. That certificate ceremony had balloons. Our mother had cried. She had called relatives. She had posted about it. My engineering degree graduation had a nice dinner afterward, and then my mother spent most of the drive home talking about how Emma had just started seeing someone new, and she hoped this one was a good person. I noticed that too. I filed it away in the place where I kept all the other noticings, and I kept moving. Graduate school came next. I worked part-time while studying. I passed my licensing exams on the first attempt, which is something fewer than half of test takers manage. I called my mother when the results came in. She said she was proud of me and asked if I could look at Emma's lease renewal paperwork because Emma did not understand what some of the terms meant. I looked at the paperwork. I explained the terms. I always did. When I finally got my full professional license and landed the job at the firm, my mother said it was wonderful and that I deserved it. Then she asked if I would be sending money home still, because Emma had just had a small car accident and would need help with the deductible. I sent the money. I always sent the money when I could, because they were my family and because I had it, and because no one had taught me yet that consistent giving without consistent respect is not generosity. It is a slow way of disappearing. So that was the background. That was the years of quiet patience and practical love and managed expectations that I carried into that afternoon when I came home with good news in my chest and walked through the front door and heard my mother explain to her sister exactly why Emma was more lovable than I was. I stood in the hallway. The kitchen was just around the corner. My mother's voice was clear and unhurried. She was telling Aunt Patris about a conversation she'd had with someone at her church group, someone who had apparently asked about her daughters. My mother had been explaining the difference between us, and that explanation had arrived at the conclusion that Emma was simply easier to love, more natural, more warm, more like what a daughter feels like when you imagine a daughter. Aunt Patris had made a soft sound, the kind that was not quite agreement and not quite disagreement. My mother had kept talking. She said that Lousia was capable, very capable, and that she was proud of Lousia's accomplishments. But she said accomplishments were not the same as connection. She said Emma made her feel needed. She said Emma called her every morning and told her about her day and laughed at her jokes. She said Lousia was always busy or focused or solving something. She said sometimes it felt like Lousia did not actually need her, and that was a hard thing for a mother. I stood in that hallway for a long time. I did not cry right then. The tears came later, much later, after I had quietly walked back out the front door and sat in my car in the parking area outside her building for 45 minutes without turning the engine on. In that moment in the hallway, I was simply still. Something was settling inside me, the way sediment settles in water when everything finally stops moving. I had known this. Some part of me had always known this. But there is a significant difference between quietly knowing something and hearing it stated as casual fact to a sympathetic audience in the kitchen you grew up in. The good news I had come to share was this. My firm had promoted me to senior structural engineer. It was a significant step. It came with a title change, a meaningful salary increase, and a lead position on a new regional infrastructure project. It was everything I had worked toward for 3 years at the company. I had wanted my mother to be the first person I told. I had imagined her face. I had imagined the phone call she might make to relatives. I had imagined, even at 31 years old, that this might be the thing that finally made her face light up the way it did for Emma's hospitality certificate. I drove home without telling her. I called my closest friend Dara from the car, and Dara screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Dara had known me since the 2nd year of graduate school, and she knew everything. She knew about Emma. She knew about the money. She knew about the graduation dinner. She screamed and celebrated and then asked if I was okay, because she also knew I had been planning to tell my mother first. I told her what had happened in the hallway. Dara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Lousia, I have been waiting for you to hear that truth out loud for about 6 years." I did not know how to respond to that. I just drove. Over the next several days, I did what I always do when something breaks open inside me. I kept working. I showed up to my job. I handled my responsibilities. I did not call my mother, which was unusual since I called her every Sunday. She texted me on Sunday evening to ask if everything was all right. I said yes. I had just been busy with a work transition. She said that was fine and then sent me a photo of a pasta dish Emma had made for her that afternoon. She said Emma had come over and cooked for her, and it was so sweet. I put my phone down and went to bed early. There is something that happens when a truth you have been managing quietly becomes a truth you have actually heard. It changes the geometry of things. I had been operating all my life as though if I was capable enough and reliable enough and generous enough, the natural outcome would eventually be a kind of emotional fairness. Not identical love. I had given up on identical long before this, but some form of acknowledgement that I mattered to her in a real and articular way. What I heard in that hallway was the end of that operating system. My mother was not withholding warmth because she was distracted or unaware. She had a formed opinion. Emma was more lovable. That was simply the conclusion she had reached, and she was comfortable enough in it to say it in her kitchen to her sister without any hesitation. I need you to understand what that does to a person who has spent years earning, achieving, and contributing partly, because some quiet voice inside them believed that proof of worth would eventually become proof of love. I went back to work the next week as senior engineer on the infrastructure project. The project was large. It involved a highway interchange redesign for a county about 40 miles from the city, and my firm had been selected through a competitive bid process that my previous lead had started before leaving the company. Taking it over was a significant responsibility, and I threw myself into it completely. Not to escape, but because the work was real and demanded my full attention and gave me something that personal life had not been giving me for a while. The feeling that what I was doing was being correctly seen. About 3 weeks after the hallway, I received a phone call from my mother. She called on a Tuesday afternoon, which was unusual. She sounded tired. She told me that Emma had separated from her boyfriend. The boyfriend, whose name was Marcus, had been covering the majority of Emma's rent and several other monthly costs. With Marcus gone, Emma was facing a situation. My mother explained it simply. Emma needed help. She did not ask me directly on that first call. She laid out the situation clearly and waited. I asked how Emma was emotionally. My mother said Emma was heartbroken and scared. I said I understood. I said I was sorry Emma was going through that. My mother waited some more. I told her I was in the middle of a significant project transition and that I would need a few days to think about what I could realistically offer. My mother's voice shifted slightly. She said she hoped I would not wait too long because the rent was due in 12 days. I said I understood. I had never in my adult life said I need to think about it when my family needed money. I had always simply responded. The fact that I did not respond immediately seemed to confuse my mother in a small but visible way. After the call, I sat with the discomfort of what I was doing. I was not refusing. I was not retaliating. I was genuinely thinking. For the first time in my adult life, I was treating a financial request from my family the way I would treat any other significant decision. I was pausing, gathering information, and considering what made sense. It felt strange. It felt almost wrong at first, the way anything feels when you stop doing the automatic thing. I called Emma directly. I had not spoken to Emma in a couple of weeks. Emma sounded sad and a little embarrassed. I asked her direct questions about her financial situation, which I had never done before. I asked what she had in savings. I asked if she had looked into any employment options. I asked if she had spoken to her building manager about a short extension. Emma answered all of it with a kind of surprised openness, as if she had not expected me to ask. She had about $400 in savings. She had not yet contacted the building manager. She had applied to one job 3 days ago. She said she was planning to ask around for more work, but she had not started yet. I told Emma I would co-sign a conversation with her building manager and help her draft a request for a 30-day extension. I told her I would help her put together a proper job search plan. I told her I would cover 1 month's rent as a loan, not a gift, and that I would write up a simple repayment arrangement so we were both clear. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she asked if I was upset with her. I told her I was not upset with her. I was simply changing how I helped, not whether I helped. Emma said okay. She sounded uncertain, like someone who had received help their whole life in a way that never required them to be a participant in their own solution. My mother called me the next morning. She had clearly spoken to Emma. Her voice was different, not hostile but careful. She asked what the loan arrangement was about. I explained it. My mother said she hoped I was not making things harder for Emma during an already hard time. I said I was making things clearer, which was different. My mother said clarity was fine, but that Emma was sensitive and already struggling, and she hoped I was being gentle. I told her I had been very gentle. I told her I had offered practical help, covered an actual expense, and sat with Emma for an hour to build a real plan. My mother said that was good, and that she just wanted to make sure Emma did not feel alone. I asked my mother if she had ever worried about me feeling alone. There was a pause. It lasted long enough to be its own answer. Then my mother said, "Lousia, you've always been so capable. You never seemed like you needed that kind of reassurance." I said that capable people still need to feel like they matter. My mother said of course I mattered. I thanked her and ended the call. I wrote down what she had said afterward. I was not keeping evidence to use against her. I was keeping a record for myself so that I could not later talk myself out of what I now clearly understood. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. Emma got the extension from her building manager. She got a part-time job at a hotel front desk within 10 days. She was not delighted about it, but she showed up. I helped her draft a simple monthly repayment schedule, small amounts that were genuinely manageable. Emma made the first payment on time. I acknowledged it with a simple text. She sent back a string of heart emojis and said she appreciated me treating her like an adult. That response surprised me more than almost anything else in the story so far. Meanwhile, at work, the infrastructure project was moving well. I had developed a good working relationship with the county project coordinator, a woman named Renata who was sharp and direct, and who seemed to genuinely value the quality of my team's work. We were on schedule, our initial assessments had been approved cleanly, and there was talk internally at my firm about the project potentially expanding in scope, which would have significant implications for my team's size and my own position. Life was moving. Something had shifted in me. I was not at war with anyone. I was not plotting anything. I was simply no longer operating from the old automatic settings. I was present to my choices in a way I had not been before that afternoon in the hallway. My mother's birthday came in the 5th week after the hallway. Every year, I organized the family birthday dinner. I booked the restaurant, sent the invitations to the relatives who were still local, handled the reservation, ordered the flowers, and covered the bill. I had done this for the past 7 years. It was simply what I did. This year, I told my mother I would love to celebrate with her, and that I was happy to come to dinner, but that I was not going to be organizing the dinner this year. I said it gently. I said it with warmth. I said I had a significant amount of work pressure and that I thought it was a good year for someone else to take the lead. My mother asked who she had in mind. I said I thought Emma might enjoy handling it, especially now that Emma was rebuilding her confidence and structure. My mother was quiet again. Then she said she would speak to Emma about it. Emma panicked when my mother called her, according to what Aunt Patris later told me with a kind of impressed disbelief. Emma said she did not know how to organize something like that. She said she did not know which restaurants to call or how to handle the invitations or how to know how many people were coming. Aunt Patris, who had always been fond of me in a quiet way that never quite made it to open advocacy, told me she had said to Emma, "Lousia figured it out when she was 24. You can figure it out too." Emma organized the dinner. It was not perfectly handled. The reservation was for one fewer person than actually came, which meant someone had to pull an extra chair. The flowers did not arrive on time. 2 relatives were not notified properly and found out from someone else, which created some embarrassment. But the dinner happened. My mother had a birthday dinner. Emma had done it. And I sat at that dinner table and ate my food and talked to my relatives and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like a guest instead of the management. After dinner, my mother hugged Emma and thanked her for putting it together. She told Emma it was wonderful. Then she came to me and said she noticed I had not organized things this year. I said that was right. She asked if everything was okay. I said yes. I said I had needed to step back from some things temporarily. My mother looked at me for a moment in a way that was harder to read than usual. Then she said, "You've always held this family together, Lousia. I don't think you know how much we depend on you." I thanked her. I smiled. I did not say what I was thinking, which was, "You depend on me, but you find Emma more lovable." I kept that inside and drove home. The next significant event came about 6 weeks later, and it arrived through a completely unexpected door. My father's older brother, my Uncle Raymond, passed away. Uncle Raymond had been distant from the family for most of my adult life. He had never married. He had built a small but real estate-based financial situation over several decades, owning 4 rental properties in the region and maintaining a modest but stable personal investment portfolio. He was private and self-contained, and I had probably spoken to him in F.ul sentences fewer than 20 times in my life. What I did know about him was that he had watched our family from a careful distance, and that he had once, at a Christmas gathering when I was about 19, pulled me aside and said that I reminded him of himself at that age, and that I should keep doing exactly what I was doing and not let anyone slow me down. I had not forgotten that. I had thought about it more than he would probably have expected. When Uncle Raymond's estate attorney contacted the family, the communication came first to my mother, since she was the closest remaining blood relative on that side of the family, alongside one other distant cousin who lived out of state. The estate had been through a proper legal process. Uncle Raymond had a will. The will was specific. The attorney's letter arrived at my mother's address by registered mail. My mother called me the same evening she received it, and her voice had a quality I had not heard before, something between stunned and careful. She read me the relevant portion of the will. Uncle Raymond had divided his estate with deliberate instruction. He had left one of his rental properties and a sum representing approximately a third of his investment portfolio directly and specifically to me, Lousia, by full legal name. The remaining estate was divided between the distant cousin and a charitable organization he had supported for years. My mother and Emma were not included in the will. My mother's voice when she finished reading was very controlled. She said she had not known Raymond very well. She said she was surprised by the decision. She said she supposed Raymond had always noticed how hard I worked. She said she was happy for me, and the pause before she said she was happy for me was the longest pause I had ever heard from her. I did not know what to say at first. I thanked her for calling me. I told her I would contact the attorney. I sat with the news for a long time after the call ended. Uncle Raymond had seen me. He had watched from a distance for more than a decade, and he had made a decision in private and formal legal writing that said, "This one." He had not needed to explain it to anyone. He had not needed to negotiate it or apologize for it. He had simply decided, and the decision was written. I cried that night. Not sad tears and not happy tears. They were a different kind entirely, the kind that come when something validates a long and quiet persistence that you were never sure was even visible. The attorney meeting happened 2 weeks later. The property was a 2-unit rental building in a neighborhood about 25 minutes from my mother's apartment. Both units were currently occupied with tenants in good standing. The investment portfolio portion had already been transferred and was waiting in a designated estate account. The numbers were real and significant enough to represent a genuine change in my financial position, not life-altering wealth, but a meaningful base of assets that I had not had before. My mother asked if she could come to the attorney meeting. I said I would prefer to handle it myself initially and that I would share any relevant information with the family afterward. She agreed, but I could hear the effort it took her to agree. Emma called me the evening after the attorney meeting. She asked how it went. I told her it went smoothly. Emma was quiet for a moment and then said, "Lousia, I think it's amazing that Uncle Raymond did that. You deserved something like this." I told her I appreciated her saying that. Emma then said something that I think she had been working up to for a while. She said she had been thinking a lot since the month of changes started, since I had started handling things differently, since the loan arrangement. She said she realized she had been living in a way that made it easy to not grow. She said she did not think it was anyone's fault exactly, but that she had been thinking about it. I told her I appreciated her honesty. I meant it. It was the most real conversation Emma and I had ever had. My mother's approach shifted over the following weeks in a way that was not dramatic, but was very clear to me. She began calling more frequently. She began asking about the property, about the tenants, about my plans for it. She mentioned twice that the property was technically in the family's neighborhood area and that it might be worth thinking about whether family could make use of it in some way. The second time she mentioned it, she said that Emma's lease was coming up in a few months and that the neighborhood where the property was located might be a better fit for Emma. I heard the request inside the non-request. I was not surprised. I was not even particularly angry. I simply noted it. I told my mother that I was working with a property management consultant to understand the best course of action for the building, and that I was not making any changes to the tenancy situation in the near my mother said that made sense, and that she just wanted to mention it since Emma was family. I said I understood. What happened next came from a direction I had not anticipated, and it escalated things in a way that forced a clarity I could no longer gently defer. One of my mother's close friends, a woman named Sylvia who had known our family for many years, and who had a particular way of speaking that made every opinion sound like neutral information, posted something in the extended family group chat. The group chat was a collection of about 23 people, aunts, cousins, my mother's generation and mine, all in one conversation that was typically used for birthday wishes and holiday photos. Sylvia was not technically family, but had been included years ago, and no one had ever removed her. Sylvia's message said that she had heard the wonderful news about the inheritance, and that she wanted to say how nice it was for the family. And then she said something that was carefully worded to sound like a compliment, but was actually a suggestion. She said she hoped that Lousia, who had always been so generous and family-oriented, would find a way to use the blessing in a way that lifted the whole family. She added a prayer hands emoji and a heart. The response in the chat was immediate. Several relatives agreed with warmth. One cousin said yes, family sticks together. Another relative said that Uncle Raymond would have wanted the family to benefit. My mother did not post anything herself, but she reacted to Sylvia's message with a heart. I read all of this very carefully. I did not respond in the chat. I let it sit overnight. Next morning, I wrote a reply. I wrote it in the same group chat, and I wrote it in the same warm tone the rest of the conversation had used, but I was precise. I said I was grateful for the well wishes, and that I was deeply thankful for Uncle Raymond's trust and decision. I said that the property and the assets were a private legal inheritance that had been designated specifically and intentionally by Uncle Raymond to me personally, and that I would be handling them with care and responsibility. I said I would not be making changes to the current tenant situation, and I said I wanted to be honest with the family so that no one was operating under a misunderstanding about the situation going forward. I said I loved my family and I wished everyone well. Then I left the group chat. Not dramatically, I just left. I set my phone down and went to make coffee. The response was swift and scattered. My Aunt Patris sent me a private message that said simply, "Well done." One cousin texted me to say I had every right. Two other relatives apparently texted my mother to ask what had happened and whether I was upset about something. Sylvia posted a follow-up in the group chat saying she had not meant any offense and that it was simply a word of encouragement. My mother called me that afternoon. She sounded measured, the way she sounds when she has decided to be reasonable even though she is not feeling reasonable. She asked why I had left the group chat. I explained that I felt the conversation had created an unfair implication about my obligations regarding the inheritance, and that I wanted to be clear without having an ongoing public discussion about my private financial situation. My mother said she understood and that she hoped I did not feel like the family was attacking me. I told her I did not feel attacked. I told her I felt that I had said something true and clear and that it was the right thing to do. My mother said, "Lousia, you've changed." I told her that was probably accurate. There was a pause. Then my mother said something that I think she had not planned to say, or at least had not planned to say in that form. She said, "I worry sometimes that we've put too much on you." I waited. She continued. She said that she knew I had always been the one who handled things, and that maybe they had let that go on longer than they should have. She said she was not always sure how to talk to me because I always seemed like I had everything together. She said Emma needed her differently. I told her I heard what she was saying. I told her I believed her. And then I said something I had been carrying since the hallway. I told her that about 2 months ago I had come home to tell her good news and I had stood in her hallway and heard her tell Aunt Patris that Emma was more lovable than I was. I said it calmly. I did not say it to wound her. I said it because it was true and because the conversation we were having could not be real without it. The silence on the other end of the phone was complete. When my mother spoke again, her voice was different. It was smaller. She asked when that had happened. I told her the date. She was quiet again. Then she said she did not remember saying it in those words. I told her that I remembered it precisely because those were the exact words. She did not argue. With that, she said she was sorry. She said she did not mean it the way it sounded. I told her I believed that she believed that, but that it had sounded like the most natural thing in the world when she said it, which was the part that had stayed with me. My mother cried a little. I held the phone and let her. I did not say it was all right, because saying it was all right had been my automatic response my entire life, and I was not going to say it automatically anymore. When she stopped crying, I said that I loved her and that I was not going anywhere. But I told her that I was also no longer going to organize my life around proving my worth to people who had already decided what they thought of me. I said that I was learning to let my choices speak without needing anyone's applause. My mother said, "That sounds like Raymond." I told her I would take that as a compliment. We stayed on the phone for a while longer. The conversation did not fix everything. You do not fix 31 years in one phone call. But something real had been said and heard, and that was different from every conversation we had ever had before. Over the next several weeks, the family recalibrated. My mother did not bring up the property again in the suggestive way she had before. She started asking me about my work with a new kind of genuine curiosity, asking about the infrastructure project, about my team, about what I was building. It was not a perfect transformation. There were still moments when her default was to talk about Emma first and ask about me second. There were still times when I could feel her discomfort at not being in the position of the person I came to for permission or approval. But there were also new things. She called me on my actual birthday that year and did not mention anything else for the first 20 minutes. She asked about my promotion at work. She said she was proud in a way that felt less like a checkbox and more like she was actually looking at me. Emma and I developed a quieter, but more honest dynamic. She made her second and third loan repayments on time. She seemed to be building something genuine, slowly and without fanfare, which I had more respect for than I had expected. She told me once that watching me handle the inheritance situation had affected her. She said she had always just assumed I would absorb whatever the family needed, and that it had never occurred to her to question whether that was fair. She said she was sorry she had not thought about it sooner. I told her the apology meant something to me. The infrastructure project moved into its second phase in the month after my conversation with my mother. The expansion was confirmed. My team grew by 4 people. I took on a mentorship responsibility for a junior engineer named Tara who reminded me of myself at 25, capable and quiet, and always staying a little too late to make sure everything was done correctly. I told Tara early on that she should learn to let people see her work, not just the results of it. That the effort mattered, and it was worth being visible about it. Tara looked at me with a kind of recognition that I understood completely. One evening, about 4 months after the hallway, I drove back to my mother's building. I had been invited for dinner, a real simple dinner, no occasion, nothing organized. Emma was there too. Aunt Patris had stopped by. We ate at the same kitchen table where my mother had explained that Emma was more lovable, and it was just dinner. Ordinary and imperfect, and sometimes a little quiet, and sometimes a little loud. My mother had made too much food the way she always did. Emma had brought a dessert that was slightly too sweet. Aunt Patris had a strong opinion about a television show that no one else watched. I sat at that table and ate and talked, and felt the particular weight of a family that is still becoming, still figuring out how to be honest with each other after years of managing careful surfaces. I did not forgive everything in a clean moment. That is not how it works. What I had was clarity, which is something better than forgiveness in some ways, because clarity does not require the other person to be ready. Clarity just requires you to see. I saw that my mother loved me. I also saw that love and understanding are separate capacities, and that a person can love you genuinely while still having a limited view of who you are. I saw that I had spent years making myself smaller in the hope that the space I left would be filled with recognition, and that the only recognition that had finally arrived was the kind I gave myself by stopping. The rental property became fully mine in every practical sense after the estate process closed. I hired a reputable property manager. The building was in good condition, and the tenants had excellent records. The income it generated was modest but consistent, and it landed in my account every month like a quiet confirmation from a man who had watched FR. Ohm across a room decades ago and decided, this one. I drove past the building sometimes on weekends. I did not stop. I just drove past and let the fact of it exist. The fact that someone had seen me not because I had made noise about it, not because I had organized the birthdays or paid the deductibles or absorbed the pressure with a smile, but simply because I had been quietly, consistently myself. And that had been enough. More than enough. It had been the thing that mattered when the time came. There is a version of this story where I walked into that kitchen and said something sharp and confrontational right there in the hallway. There is a version where I made a scene at the birthday dinner, or refused to help Emma, or posted something bitter in the family chat. That version would have felt better for about 15 minutes and worse for a very long time. The version I lived is the one where I just stopped disappearing. I stopped letting my capabilities become an excuse for other people to stop seeing me. I stopped absorbing requests that were dressed up as love but were actually logistics. I stopped letting my strength be used as evidence that I did not need care. I let a pause stretch out where there used to be an immediate yes. I asked questions. I held boundaries with both hands and did not apologize for holding them. I let the truth I heard in that hallway become a turning point. Instead of another wound, I managed quietly. And I found out something that I think I needed to hear in the most difficult possible way. Being indispensable is not the same as being valued. And being lovable is not something you earn through productivity. It is something that exists when people are willing to actually see you. My mother is still learning to see me. I am still learning to stay visible. Emma is still figuring out how to build something that is genuinely hers. Aunt Patris still has opinions about that television show. The family is still a family, complicated and real and not perfectly repaired, but moving toward something more honest than where we started. And I am still Lousia, still the one who handles things, but now on my own terms and for my own reasons. Still capable, still committed, still generous when generosity comes from real choice and not from fear of being found inadequate. Still building. Still the kind of woman who parks outside and cries in the car when she needs to, and then starts the engine and drives home and goes to work in the morning and leads the team and signs the documents and walks into the rooms where her name is finally starting to mean what she always knew it meant. Uncle Raymond was right. I reminded him of himself, and I am glad he said so. And I am glad, in the complicated and lasting way of things that are truly glad, that I came home early that afternoon. Because if I had not heard what she said, I might have kept trying to earn something that was never actually withheld. What was withheld was not her love. What was withheld was her full attention. And once I stopped performing for it, once I simply became too genuinely present and too clearly grounded in my own life to be overlooked, something changed. Not everything, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to build. Enough to drive past a building on a Saturday morning and feel something that is close to peace. That is the story. That is what I heard when I came home early. And what came after was the longer, quieter, harder, and more important story of what I chose to do with it. If any part of Lousia's story touched something in you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Tell me if you have ever been the capable one in your family, the one who handled things, the one who was depended on but not always truly seen. Tell me if you have ever had to make the quiet, hard decision to stop absorbing and start choosing. Lousia's story is about one woman, but this feeling belongs to a lot of people, and you deserve to know that you are not alone in it.